dive deep into the weeds. And then we met again to really go through, and find out from these city representatives what is it that your decision makers really want to know. Help us sort of craft this presentation to make sure that we're providing the information that folks want to know. We also went and spoke to Sound Cities as well as some other regional policy committees to provide briefings. So the purpose of the long-term disposal study, as you've heard, the landfill, which is the only active landfill in King County, the Cedar Hills Regional Landfill, is set to close in about 2038, 2840 timeframe. That's when it will reach capacity. And it was to help really prepare for the closure of this. We looked at 3 different disposal tonnage scenarios, right? So we're not sure what are or how much tonnage is going to be going to the landfill each year, 13, 14, 15 years from now. So we provided 3 different scenarios for our consultant to look at. One is kind of a status quo, where we don't see a whole lot of change, not a whole lot of increase in diversion of materials headed to the landfill. Then there's kind of a middle of the road replus scenario is what we call it. And that's about 2/3 of the material heading to the landfill. That includes successful implementation of things like mixed waste processing, extended producer responsibility, the different organics laws that have passed recently in recent years, those sorts of things. And then we have a really sort of high diversion, low tonnage scenario, which assumes that we reach zero waste of resources by 2030. And zero waste of resources is basically saying anything that has any materials that have economic value are diverted away from the landfill. And so that would be about 68 to 70% of the material we're sending right now, we would no longer be sending to the landfill under that scenario by 2030. So pretty ambitious. And that's kind of the other bookend. And all this sort of helps us prepare for what we need to do next between 2040 and 2060, our next disposal option after that landfill closes. So we studied a lot of different things, or the scope of the study was fairly broad, but there are some things that we wanted to point out that aren't included in the study, that some of those things will be looked at in different areas. For example, hyperlocal impacts on the environment or specific communities. This study doesn't include a specific site selection for example, waste to energy or mass burn rather. And so we couldn't say, that's how it's going to affect this community or that community. We will do a closer or a deeper dive on environmental impacts and things like that in the environmental impact statement work that we're doing with parametrics, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then, of course, if the ultimate decision is something like mass burn, where we have to site a facility, then we would look into the sort of social impacts in that particular community or in the ones that are being considered for siting. It doesn't look at how replus will look or like how it's going to play out, but it does include different impacts from replus through the 3 different tonnage scenarios that we provided. And the more partnership that we have with cities and the more progress we can make together, the county and the city together, the more opportunity that we'll have for disposal and the less waste that we'll have to send to the next disposal impact. It also doesn't look at rate impacts. It does look at cost, capital cost and operating cost, but because rates are a real complicated beast and they include a lot of different layers to make that cake, a lot of things can change between now and 2040, so we didn't feel like it would be correct to provide a sort of an estimate for that. So we do provide a comparison of cost per ton that helps us sort of tell the difference, in the relative cost between these options. The cost benefit, we also don't look at the cost benefit analysis of combining different disposal methods, and that will become clear in a little bit. We started with 5 disposal options, but it turns out that really for King County, really only 2 of them are really feasible, and we'll explain more about that here shortly. And then partial early export, right? This is where we start sending a portion of our solid waste by rail to one of these to one of the landfills in southeastern Washington or northeastern early. And And that's largely because previous analysis has shown that running 2 disposal options at the same time is pretty expensive. Um, and, uh, and so we did not look at that in this study. So the 5 different disposal options that we looked at are waste export by rail, again, Weber, mass burn with Weber, pyrolysis, gasification, and refuse-derived fuel. So waste export is by rail is essentially what it sounds like. It's what our neighbors do. Seattle does it. Snohomish does it. Kitsap does it. And I believe that's one of the plans that Pierce County is looking at when their landfill closes in the coming years. And this involves, you basically take they're sort of like shipping containers. We load them up at our transfer stations. We take them to one of two existing intermodal rail facilities, or IMFs, and then they're taken by train down the gorge to one of these 2 landfills, or a combination of these landfills. Mass burn with Weber or waste incineration to create energy requires siting and building of a new facility, and it doesn't sort of make all of the waste go away, right? It reduces it about 75% of it. So if you've got 100 tons at the beginning of the process, you wind up with 25 tons at the end of the day. So that, and that's in the form of ash. So that still needs to be taken to by rail to one of these landfills to be taken care of, because it's such a significant amount of the, it's still a significant amount of waste being exported by rail. We felt like, and our city partners agreed that this is something, that we should point that out in the name. Refuse derived, pyrolysis and gasification, they're referred to usually as thermal treatment. Basically, it's superheating the garbage, but it's doing so in a limited oxygen environment. So there's no actual burning. And then the residual from that is oils and synthetic gases and things like that. They can be sold or refined to make energy. And then refuse-derived fuel is less of a disposal method and more of sort of a mechanical processing process, whereby the waste is sort of ground up, it's mixed, it's dried out, and it's turned into either pellets or fluff.
1 second, sorry. Go ahead.
It turned into pellets or fluff that are then used in boilers and things like cement plants and what have you. And that's what RDF is. We didn't, or how did these last 3 options, they were taken out of the study, or they're not taken out of the study. All the information is still in the study, but they've been taken out of consideration as one of the options that we might consider for long-term disposal. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. These 5 options wound up in the study.
Jason.
I've tried to make it work on Zoom. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. They wound up in the study. Waste export and mass burn were already in the comp plan as options to be considered. Pyrolysis and gasification were also mentioned as possible options. And then when we did a solicitation for a consultant to conduct this study, we gave them the option of adding an additional option to analyze, and they chose refuse-derived fuel. Transport by barge was also, we spoke about this, but it wasn't considered for the study because it had been looked at before, and the expense of custom barges and the development of intermodal facility with a dock was considered too expensive and less efficient. So those are the options, and these are the study criteria that we used. Overall, there were 28 criteria that we looked at, which are grouped into these 6 larger categories that answer sort of these essential questions that you see here on the slide. For example, economic impact is looking at both capital costs and operational costs, and then the consultant sort of translated that into a cost per ton in 2040 dollars to make comparison possible. Environmental impact looks at a variety of factors, including greenhouse gas emissions, smog formation, cancer potential, acidification, the displacement of non-renewable energy sources, things of that nature. For social impact, we looked at noise and traffic impacts and potential jobs created. Again, these aren't specific to a specific area because we didn't choose a site. That wasn't part of this study. But if we do ultimately decide to do waste energy as a county and as a solid waste system, then we would do a closer look at particular county or impacts into particular communities. For capacity, we were looking at two things. What's the minimum amount of tonnage that these technologies require to be feasible? Can they also take the total amount of tons? If we're looking at a high tonnage scenario, would these technologies be able to handle it? As well as how adaptable they are to changes in tonnage due to the implementation of EPR, improved enforcement for organics laws or something like that, right? For logistics, we're talking about operating life. We're talking about challenges with siting, design, and permitting considerations, as well as how does it fit with our current diversion systems, right? Our RePlus program. Does it promote or does it hamper recycling? And then for operating history, we want to look at, is this a proven technology? Is it something that's being used elsewhere? We want to look at their safety and environmental and regulatory compliance records if they've had issues with that. So those are sort of the high level criteria. And now for the good stuff, the sort of key takeaways. This first slide is talking about refuse-derived fuel and gasification. So refuse-derived fuel, again, it's technically capable of processing all the tons that we want to send through it. It does have some challenges, though. Food waste is one of those. There's a lot of salt in that food waste, and it creates chlorides when that material is burned, which can cause real problems for boilers and other equipment. And cement kilns really need to maintain specific temperatures, and so they really prefer feedstocks that are more homogeneous and have higher energy density across samples of the material. There's also an issue with markets, right? So we could be creating a lot of this refuse-derived fuel. The contracts for these tend to be pretty short-lived, 1 to 2 years, and there's no guarantee that we could find markets for all this. So we could end up in a situation where we've produced a lot of RDF but can't sell it anywhere. So we basically made our trash more expensive and still have to landfill it or burn it somewhere else. For gasification and pyrolysis, the issues there really is scale and technology. The largest facility I think we looked at was looking at 30,000 tons per year, and that's about 1/10 the size of even our lowest tonnage scenario in the future. So we're looking, last year we sent about 840,000 tons to the Cedar Hills landfill, and the low tonnage scenario is 333,000 tons. So the largest facility for gasification or pyrolysis was 30,000 tons a year.
Brian, sorry, can I interject?
Sure.
It's 45,000 tons a year. It wouldn't even handle Renton's waste.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't even handle Renton's waste. That's an excellent point, Mira. Thank you. 45,000 tons a year. So because of that, and because they have really struggled to show that they can handle mixed solid waste, mixed municipal solid waste without real challenges, it's also considered sort of infeasible. It also creates another sort of byproduct of these is a tar that's really toxic and is really difficult to clean out of their machinery and whatnot. So it's just really not a proven technology. And so we brought these, well, our consultant brought this information to us and to our committees and asked asked what we wanted to do, and sort of unanimously we agreed that these, although we'll leave the information in the study so that it's available for folks, that they really weren't feasible options for a long-term disposal. So that leaves us with mass burn with Weber and Weber by itself. Key takeaways here, you can see the capital cost is quite high, $1.2 billion for a facility. Operational costs annually over $75 million. That includes disposing of that extra 25% by weight of ash. And that all shakes out to about $230 per ton in 2040 dollars. our consultants also really wanted to emphasize that the siting of a mass burn facility is very difficult, and it can take over 10 years to site, permit, and design one of these facilities, and then you still have to build it. So very challenging to do that. The environmental criteria that we looked at were compared using a life cycle analysis, right? So it's sort of like looking at global factors, right? It's not looking at what's the impact just here in King County or just in Washington. It is saying, let's look at the sort of globe holistically and see how that shakes out. It looks at the impacts of transportation, processing, so the act of utilizing mass burn or landfilling material, and energy offsets, right? So both landfills and waste to energy produce energy, and so the idea is that the offset is, all right, if we're creating this energy using waste to energy, what kind of energy are we offsetting and no longer doing? In this case, it's mostly coal. It's sort of dirtier technology. So you'll see, especially for waste to energy or mass burn, they get some credits for offset. And this is not necessarily to say that this is how it would happen in the real world, but it is a way to say this is how we're going to sort of compare these two technologies or these two options on a level playing field. So you can see there on the slide, it shows a benefit to non-renewable energy. In other words, it offsets some dirty air energy. It shows a benefit to acidification and smog formation. Again, that's because of the types of energy that it is offsetting. It does show a detriment in global warming, water consumption, and cancer potential. It also financially disincentivizes lowering tonnage through diversion. It's not very compatible with RE+, in other words, because the capital cost is so high. There's a financial incentive to push as many tons through it as possible. That's not saying that it would reduce recycling, but it does create a financial incentive to move, to not do as much of that. It does, as I mentioned, reduce the waste, the weight of the waste, 75% by waste, but we'd still need to transport that material to an ash monofill via waste export by rail. There's also been a series of closures of these types of facilities here along the West Coast. California closed their two. The two that they had in 2020, just last year, also closed theirs. So that leaves the facility in Spokane as the only waste to energy or mass burn facility on the West Coast. One additional challenge that we have here is that the the Clean Energy Transformation Act, or CETA, also classifies municipal solid waste as a non-renewable resource. So the energy created by burning it is not can't be sold at a retail level here in the state. So basically, federal law requires local utilities to buy that energy, but then they would have to sell it in other states and other jurisdictions. So there's transmission costs, there's interconnectivity costs, and things like that that would reduce the economic value of that energy. Waste export by rail is significantly less expensive. You can see there the capital cost is $3.3 million. We wouldn't need to build new IMFs. There's no facility to site or to build. That $3.3 million is looking at sort of the new vehicle or the new trailers that we would need that are essentially picked up and stacked onto rail cars. The operational costs, $72 million a year, and that shakes out to about $108 a ton, as compared to the $230 for waste or for mass burn. It can use existing infrastructure, as I mentioned. The LCA, life cycle analysis, shows a benefit to water consumption, neutral to cancer potential, and a detriment or a worsening in the other environmental categories we looked at, like acidification, smog formation, and things like that. It can, as you might imagine, it can easily accommodate changes in tonnage. If we have fewer tons, we put fewer tons on the rail to send down. If we have more, then we just send more down on the rail. The consultants also reached out to the rail lines and asked about capacity, as well as room in the landfills these trains would be headed to, and they saw no significant impact to rail capacity over the study period. One thing to mention though here is that they do prefer, the rail lines prefer shorter contracts, 5 to 10 years. Landfills usually prefer much longer contracts to lock in that price and ensure revenue. But because there's a rail component here and there's changing costs associated with their work, they're looking for smaller or shorter timelines on their contracts, which does sort of expose the county to additional price risk there. Next steps, there's still quite a bit to be done before a decision is made. We've begun the SEPA process with a consultant. We just had a kickoff meeting about a month ago. The scoping period, you can see there's a couple of items on this list that have an asterisk by them. Those are opportunities for cities and interested parties to engage and provide feedback, to learn about what's going on, and provide feedback to help us make this decision. You can see there the scoping period is coming up. There'll be 4 in-person meetings and a virtual meeting. This is currently scheduled for the middle of June to early July. Then we'll have the draft EIS. I believe that the hope is to have that by the end of this year. We've already begun sort of these kinds of city briefings, but we'll be happy, I'm sure, to entertain additional city briefings as this process moves along. And then the regular EIS updates to advisory committees, right? MSWAC and SWAC and your representatives there. And then by the end of 2026, the final EIS should be completed. We'll share that out with everyone, give folks a while to digest that, and then we'll seek advisory committee recommendations in the beginning of 2027. So that's when we'll be coming to ask, what is it that Renton wants to do, as well as the rest of the cities in our system. We'll provide that information to the executive office, and they'll make the proposal through the comp plan adoption process to council, and then the comp plan will come to the cities for adoption as well. This timeline is subject to change, but we really hope to stick to it. We know that folks are eager to talk about ILAs because of CIP costs or capital costs associated with the South County Recycling and Transfer Station, Northeast Recycling and Transfer Station, and other projects that we have. And extending those ILAs will allow us to spread that debt over a longer time, helping reduce pressure on the rates. But this decision needs to be made first, so that's what we're going to do. And that's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. My contact information is really small there, but happy to entertain any questions.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. Gosh, I feel like we've been talking about Cedar Hills for a long time. So I'm glad that we're starting to move down the road on this. When you were talking about waste export by rail, do we have any other examples in the state of folks who export their waste by rail?
So Seattle sends its waste to those landfills by rail. So does Snohomish County. Kitsap County does it, and I think Pierce County is looking into it when they.
Mr. Chair, Mr. President, has there been any negative reaction by the residents in those communities?
I really don't feel qualified to talk about the residents of other communities. I assume, there's, the study does talk about noise factors and things like that associated with waste export by rail. But we're happy to reach out and see if we can provide some information if they've done studies or something, or surveys or things like that. I'd be happy to provide anything we can find.
Thank you, Brian.
Member McIrvin.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you mentioned the railroad contracts being preferred to be shorter, and I know you said that the landfills prefer it longer. Did you say about how long we'd be looking for that? And is there any concern on capacity in the long term if everyone is going this route of waste export by rail, in terms of how long is that a viable solution before we have to come up with something else?
The report says that there's 300 years worth of landfill life, and that there isn't that there wouldn't be a significant impact by adding King County's tonnage to the rail through the study period 2040 to 2060. We didn't look beyond that, but during the period of the study, there doesn't seem to be a significant impact.
Councilmember O'Halloran.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the information. And this is more of just a general interest question. Is Washington State the only state that prohibits the mass burn resale?
Of the energy created through mass burn, I'm not sure if that's the case. I would be a little bit surprised if it was the only one, but I'm happy to look into that and send that information back through our contact.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, but I don't know off the top of my head. I apologize.
Councilmember Renton.
Thank you, Council President. Great presentation, Brian. I really do appreciate all the information. I've nerded out on the landfill for some time because I see the closing date just push ever so in my lifetime. And I appreciate the information. I'm a little partial to gasification and I can't say the word, pyrolysis.
Paralysis.
Thank
No,
you so much, sir.
Actually, that's not right.
No, is it not? Okay,
Not
I'll go
really.
with that
I
one.
put the emphasis on wrong.
Is there an option, even though those three have kind of been removed, the final three, the gasification and the refused raw fuel, is there an option though when it comes to the leaning towards waste export by rail to do a combination, like do maybe waste export by rail with maybe some gasification or a combination of these five, or are we just solely going to focus on one for right now?
The idea is really just to focus on either mass burn with waste export by rail or waste export by rail by itself. We just haven't seen a pyrolysis really pan out for mixed waste processing, for mixed municipal solid waste. So they tend to do a little bit better if you have very specific or more homogeneous waste streams or feedstocks. But the stuff that winds up in there it's dirty, it's contaminated, and they've really had a hard time getting the technology to work properly.
Thank you for answering my question.
At least that's what the study says.
Thank you.
I have a question, actually. Brian, the closures of the mass burn facilities on the West Coast, why did they close? Any idea?
I don't know the reasoning behind that, but I expect that's something that we can find out and provide that information to you.
And if I may have a follow-up. Sure, President. Sorry, the levity. The only place I know, my knowledge is limited, but the only place I know that in the world, I guess, that I've heard that do the mass burn and been doing it for a while is over in Germany, I believe. And when I learned about that, I heard that they were using the ash, or at least some part of it, in different ways. I think for roadways type stuff. All that stuff. Sounds like we're just saying, well, we need to get rid of that too. Was that considered? Is there some reason why we couldn't do some of that as well? Why we couldn't? And I don't know how well it works over there. I just know that they've been doing it for a while. So I'm curious how it plays with what we're talking about.
I've heard about that too. I'm not sure about the specifics. I know that we have different environmental laws here than we have there. Waste energy is much more prevalent in Europe, in Germany, and I think Denmark and Sweden do it as well. Maybe most of the countries, I'm not sure, but I know that there are quite a few facilities over there. And I have heard that they use it as I think they used it in applications like road base. I don't know what the science is on that in terms of toxicity, but that's certainly something that we could look at. We may be able to add that as something to look at for the EIS, but I can follow up and see if I can find some additional information. I think it is mentioned briefly in the report, but there's not significant treatment of it.
And you answered my other question already about how long do we have for the other landfills before, but I guess 300 years we're kicking the can down the road for future generations to worry about. Okay. Councilmember Van O'Halloran.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the presentation, Brian. I have a question. As we come up with the two options out of the five, so is it that we're going to go with one or is it that we're going with both? And what is your, like, what do you believe from the research and everything that you've done? I know that these are the information, we're talking about reduction of 70%, and but we still have to deal with the ash and so forth. And there's no like unicorn answer. But I'm trying to understand, even though we're kicking the can down 300 years, whatever the amount, there are environmental concerns. And it's not really, it's like if we don't do it, then we're kind of stuck, right? So we have to do something. It's kind of where we're at.
We do have to do something with the waste. It continues to come, and it's our job to manage it. So we do, and so there. I mean, there really are. The study says that essentially there's really two feasible options. One is mass burn with Weber with waste export, which is essentially a combination of both, or just waste export 100%. So the answer is sort of yes, both. But those are the only two that the study has found to be feasible for the amount. And I did forget to mention earlier on, not only did we give them three different scenarios for the waste, but it was the amount of waste, but also the composition. And we looked at what are the sort of policies and things that might be put in place to divert waste at these different levels. And we reduced that using waste characterization data from studies that we've done in the past. So the percentage of paper, the percentage of metals, the percentage of different kinds of plastics, those sorts of things. That was also part of the study. So, for example, we wanted to know, if we get down to 330,000 tons, that low tonnage scenario, what's left in the waste, and can you even get a mass burn facility to burn whatever is left in the waste? Is it all glass and bricks, or is it mostly wood? Is it food? What is it, and will that work with the technologies that are at issue in the study?
Valerie?
Yes, thank you. This might be a multifaceted question, but it's my understanding that whatever is decided will impact everybody in King County, all the cities and all the unincorporated areas.
Everyone but Seattle and Milton.
Okay, thank you. And so the decision is, what are we going to do with our waste? We're going to ship it somewhere. We are not, and this is just a point of clarification, we are not attempting to decide what happens to that waste when it gets there, correct?
If we ship it to the landfills,
Yeah.
It'll be landfilled. But I mean, I guess if they decided to build some sort of waste to energy facility or a mixed waste processing facility or something like that there, I assume that would be involved in contract negotiations, but that's a question that the study doesn't ponder.
Thank you. And so if I'm hearing correctly, our limited decision is what to do with it to get it out of King County and dropped somewhere. And once it's dropped somewhere, if that somewhere fills up, then more than likely we'll just find another somewhere. Or they will find another somewhere. And that's not our part of the scheme. Am I getting that right?
Well, I think at that point, right, because these contracts with the rail companies especially are 5 to 10 years usually, that we'd have to, we'd re-up and we'd find another, I'm sort of assuming here that we would want to, we're concerned about what happens to it once it leaves, right? Landfilling is cheaper than treating it in other ways. So my expectation is that once we had a contract with, a rail yard and a landfill, that's what they would do with it, as opposed to investing in something with high capital costs. But that's something that, we could address with the folks that we contract with. And I expect if they were going to do something with it that we didn't want them to do, then when the contract came due, we'd look for another option. We'd have another conversation like this about what to do.
Thank you again. Excuse me. Council President Albertson actually kind of triggered this for me in terms of the question. And I kind of wanted to hear that it seems like the waste export by rail is kind of like the better option for the long-term, short-term. And I would really ask for us to push for the infrastructure and the investments for the long-term investments around maybe gasification and the infrastructure around the word I can't pronounce that I'm not going to try to announce. It sounds like paralysis. but it's not.
Pyrolysis is
Thank
what
you.
it is.
One more time.
Pyrolysis.
Thank you so much, sir. It sounds better when you say it anyway. Just because I don't want to see this being kicked down to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. I think we have about 2 generations on this dais alone. And sorry, so sorry. But I mean, in terms of representation of our city, I think we need to also think of the long term. And so are we thinking about that? Are we thinking just about the next 20, 30 years and not the next 100? Are we considering like my unborn children by chance, for lack of a better way of phrasing it?
I think that's part of the conversation to have as we move forward. The decision is made through the comp plan process, right? And so it has to go through the King County Council, but it also has to be adopted by the cities. And so that's a conversation that can be part of the conversation as we have, especially as we go through the EIS process. Encourage you to make comments like that there. But when we're talking narrowly about the findings of this study, the study period is from 2040 to 2060.
Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Ryan.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you hadn't
Is
spoken.
someone
Go for
else?
it. No, you go for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. In 2018, when the King County Council had several open houses to listen to the concerns of the residents before they decided to keep the Cedar Hills regional landfill open for a longer time. Obviously, the Renton residents have been severely impacted, not because different situations. But what your presentation said is that they expected to reach capacity for 2040. My understanding is that even if it's not reached capacity, you guys are going to close it on 2040, or the plan is that if it's still after 2040 is more capacity, we're going to keep it open?
The plan is to keep it open as long as there's capacity to put waste in it. I assume we would continue to send it there. We're not going to exceed the permitted height or anything like that. We won't. We're building Area 9, and that's the last area that's planned to be built. The plan is not to build any additional areas after that. I think we're essentially out of room at that point to build any more. And the comp plan currently calls for not siting or building another landfill within King County.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I have a follow-up question? At the time, most of the complaints of the Renton residents were two. One is that the eagles used to pick up the garbage, and some of them flew the garbage outside of that area and drop it in their yards or in their houses. And the other one was the smell. There was areas in Renton that were very impacted in certain times of the year by the smell of the cedar kills. Yeah. I don't recall in the last 5 years receiving an email or I don't think hearing anybody complain anymore about the smells. I don't know what you guys did or if you take action, but I know that a lot of people call directly King County when these issues happen. Do you know if the volume of calls complaining about this have reduced in the past 5 years?
As far as I know, they have. So we've looked at, and I haven't done it recently. I haven't done it over the last couple, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, the last time I queried the PISCA database, the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency database for odor complaints about transfer stations or Cedar Hills landfill. And there are some, but they're not, I couldn't tell you for sure where, what part of, what city that, did they come from? Maple Valley? Did they come from Kent or Renton or whatever the case is? But I do know that overall the trend is down. There's been far fewer. We have, and I'm speaking a little bit out of school here because I don't work at the landfill, but I know that they've got that they do have odor sensors, and I know that there's some transfer stations that I think have and may still be using sprayers. I know they spray down the transfer stations and things like that to make sure that debris and dust and that comes out of garbage is called leachate, that it's not creating smells in the area to the extent that can. So there is an effort to control the odors for sure.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Ryan, Valerie, and we only have like 2 minutes. We need to finish.
I think Councilmember Rivera essentially asked my question, so I'll pass.
Okay. Valerie.
Yeah, so just to follow up on Councilmember Perez's comment, I live in the Renton Highlands, and I will tell you that the smell is still present at times. It's a very vinegary, very pungent smell, but it's much less often than it used to be. Anytime we had a wind coming out of the east heading toward Renton, it was really bad, really bad. It's much improved, but it is still there on occasion.
Thank you for sharing.
Share that message with our ops group.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation and look forward to hearing what comes out of the additional analysis. At this point, I move that the council recess the committee of the whole meeting into executive session for approximately 10 minutes to discuss potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection I, with no official action to be taken, and the committee of the whole meeting is to adjourn when the executive session adjourns.
Thank you.